Of the many ways people think about history, cemeteries rarely are at the top of their list. Not so with Dirk Siedlecki. For nearly 2 decades, 3 or 4 days of each and every week, Dirk has arrived in the cemetery with just one mission in mind: saving the cemetery and saving its history. Now, this video is taken from videos he shared with me. Dirk talks about his passion, his vision, and his mission. First, how not to damage stone and metal markers when you're trying to clean them. It's a technique that not only applies to cemeteries, but also monuments and statues that are marred or destroyed by well-meaning people using the wrong tools and the wrong techniques.
We have a selection of different size brushes, and notice they're all natural bristle brushes. They are a little bit more expensive. They do last a lot longer, and it's the best thing to use on the stone. Stay away from anything that has color in it. You'll see a lot of those kitchen type brushes or toothbrushes and they have coloring in them. You always run the risk of that. It's a dye, and that's going to come off, and while you're cleaning the marker, it could put the dye or the stain on the marker, and you're never going to get it out. So natural bristle brushes are the best, and as I said, we have different sizes, and we've got these little tiny ones, work wonderful, nail brushes. There's all kinds of brushes that you can use. Rule of thumb is if it's too harsh, if you wouldn't use it on your face, don't use it on a marker. That might be an extreme, but there's a lot to be said about that. Other things, we do have latex gloves. We suggest people wear, not so much when you're using the water, but we use a product D2 that I suggest you use that. Popsicle sticks, wonderful for getting in and around the inscriptions. It's not going to hurt. These aren't just for shish kebab. They are little skewers. Again, great for working on the inscriptions and the symbolism. Toothbrushes. Where are my? I have to watch because Cricket's going to steal my. Somebody asked earlier today about sizes.
I have some.
Yeah.
Looking ones, but not the one like you have.
Yeah. But different sizes depending on the size of the marker that you're working on. Again, no metal at all. There are these plastic scrapers and different kinds of wooden sticks and things like that work extremely well. So things to avoid when you're going to do marker cleaning. One thing I'm going to say, and then we're going to do, that's starting to get shady over there. You don't want to do marker cleaning in the bright sunlight. Reason for that, other than comfort, the stone will dry out much quicker in the hot sun. And remember, you want to work on a wet stone. You want to keep your stone wet as you work on it. So the sun, or in a windy day, the stone will dry out. I mean, you can do it, but you're going to have to remember that it's windy, the stone's drying out, so you want to keep it really wet. The first thing that you want to do before you start working on it is check it out. Make sure that it's sturdy, again from the side, not in front, not in the back. Make sure the marker is secure. And then kind of look around the marker and just see what kind of shape is it in. If you see flaking on the marker, don't even attempt to clean it. You're going to do more damage than you are good. See if there's previous repairs to it. Cracks, just make sure that it's secure, and then you have that in mind when you're cleaning the marker. Don't flood that area with water, and more for stability, and just make sure it's good to go. And the marker cleaning, which people are still working on a few markers, taking pictures. They cleaned a military marker and 2 rather large markers. Starting with just taking the moss off of the marker. They were really quite covered with moss, and as I mentioned earlier, the moss holds the moisture on the stone. We don't want that. We don't want the stone to be as dry as it possibly can. So they're enjoying the fruits of their labor of cleaning these markers, and they really look wonderful. So I'm a happy camper. I think it was a good workshop, and I think people learned some. We had a lot of cemetery people, and a couple of them that had to leave a little earlier thanked us and really appreciate it. They picked up a few ideas and a few tips on restoration work, so hopefully everybody benefited. I know my brother and I did. I know Chuck is pleased, so hopefully everybody else is.
Here is a sample of what happened to the memorial to aviator Eugene Ely that was placed near his hometown in Williamsburg, Iowa, in the early 1960s. A succession of cleanings with gritty cleansers and perhaps metal brushes have left the inscription barely readable. Dirk was also an expert on repairing monuments. Here, he supervised the repair of a historic marker.
Good morning, Will. Now it's August 6th, 2015. Today we're going to be working on the Pickens plot here. It's all messed up. We're going to fix it.
Better than that.
But this is the boulder over here that's really kind of holding
You have no
it.
idea how close we thought we were to solving this.
Whoa!
Shee. And it's really strange because it appears as if they cut the curbing for this marker, the base, to go in there. You know,
Yeah, doesn't make any sense.
no,
does
it doesn't.
But that would be the good place to put it
But
back.
we'd like to get it back. This was
Morning, guys. Morning, Mr. Eric. How are you?
yeah, right here. Yeah, I'm thinking, Eric, if you took that guy off and maybe set him over here out of the way, I have a feeling that next piece
Whoa! Okay, you get to listen to me. We can dig through there. You want to push through there, or can we get through?
Should we use the fragment and break that cement off? I think it'll probably come off. We just we just need something to. It just has to.
We'll go through.
Really wondering if you could have it We'll see.
Oh yeah, you shouldn't be over there with your current conditions out there, right? You did, Mr. Cyrus, wasn't that?
That's the problem. It's hard to tell when you're filling it back in and looking at the base. Hurry.
You either get the can to the hill or you go.
Right about here.
Right here.
Yesterday, no lead.
Yeah, right.
It's just enough.
So gravel.
We can use some more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, things got slivers.
Yes.
What?
Green did back there.
Real rocks. Yeah, we have enough. We have enough.
Hold on. Be careful here.
I'm thinking I might just put one
Ooh,
big.
it's moving. She is.
Okay.
She lost it.
Wait.
No?
I need to get my fingers out.
Oh, that would be a good idea. I got you.
Get ready, Steve. Pull that out.
It's all
It wasn't that good the day it was put in. Look at it.
Eric! Bingo!
Whoa!
She's level, baby, level.
Today we're gonna start with a real easy one. We're gonna work on this little marker here. That's lead you on. Just move that so we see why we're starting that one. Just
You want me to move it?
just see, right. You can hear something under there. We're gonna level that because obviously leaning, and if somebody eventually goes by, you can knock it over. But it's going to settle and end up cracking, so we're going to work on that one.
Here are some brief excerpts from interviews where Dirk talked about his passion, historic cemeteries, and the need to preserve, protect, and restore them.
Determine how we can get this cemetery taken care of by people, owners, the city, and volunteers. I personally feel we have an obligation to care for those that came before us. 6,000 souls buried here in the cemetery. Oddfellows, a fraternal organization. We have the Masonics, we have a Jewish section, a Catholic section, and 2 more fraternal organizations, the Improved and Independent Orders of Red Men. First person that was actually buried in the cemetery is Margaret Love. She was buried here in October of 1859. Now, the cemetery did not officially open until December of 1859. I'm just amazed how the stone carvers were able to carve these stones and do this beautiful design, flowers or inscriptions on these monuments, and then how they were able to get them here by horse and wagon and bring them up the hill. Is in the floor is a trapdoor. Their bodies would be stored in this vault in the tool house until the weather permitted a grave to be buried. And here we are, almost 2020. We still bury people in the cemetery.
So Dirk, if the grave was unmarked, how do you determine that it was Dr. Miller, or Mr. Miller, excuse me?
Well, fortunately, checking the Jacksonville Cemetery records, we determined where the family block was, and Tina and Chuck gave us some information, followed it up with the cemetery records, confirmed the family block and the actual plot that the records indicated he was buried in. So wow, we were fortunate that our records are pretty good for the cemetery. We were able to find them, even without a marker.
Very nice. Okay, so why is it so important, of course, to mark graves?
Well, we have about 6,500 souls buried in the Jacksonville Cemetery, and somewhere between 500 and 1,000 of those grave sites are not marked. And there's numerous reasons for that. Families moved on, never had the opportunity to mark a grave. People couldn't afford to purchase a marker, or in some cases it was wooden crosses and wooden tablet style markers, long since disintegrated. So when we have an opportunity like this, where a family member is willing to purchase a marker, we're absolutely delighted, because that's one more grave site that's going to be marked permanently. In fact, this year we've had 5 grave sites that from pioneers from back in the late 1800s that families or donations have allowed us to place markers.
Finally, in a talk to the local genealogical society, Dirk talks about what he and his volunteers have done in the local cemetery and why they do it.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Genealogy Library and their staff for the excellent records and reference material they maintain and make available on our historic cemeteries and those buried within their grounds. It is a tremendous asset and very much appreciated. I know that given your love of genealogy, most of you also have a fondness for visiting old cemeteries and walking the grounds, reading the names, studying the inscriptions and symbolism. You are also aware of how important our cemeteries are as a tool when doing genealogy. Our historic cemeteries have so much to offer us. Our communities, residents and visitors alike. They are all truly outdoor museums filled with history, artwork, wildlife, wildflowers, trees and vegetation to be seen and enjoyed by all. What I would like to talk about today is not only what our cemeteries have to offer, along with the importance of caring for them and maintaining them, but things that can be done to make people more aware of how important they are to our communities and how to attract visitors, new volunteers, donations, and support from the community. By offering regular, interesting programs, events, and activities, we are keeping the cemetery as a current feature and an active part of our communities. When most people see or think of an old cemetery, they tend to dismiss it as simply a final resting place. Life is over. There is nothing further to be learned from those resting within its grounds, and the cemetery has nothing further to contribute to the community. Well, in my opinion, and shared by many, nothing could be further from the truth. These historic cemeteries around our state, as well as the country, have much to offer our communities, its residents and visitors alike. In many cases, the establishment of a cemetery signaled the start of a new city or town and contains the history of those communities that we are now fortunate to call home. I believe that how well a cemetery is cared for can tell us a lot about that community and its residents. I would like to share with you some ideas of how a cemetery can become a more important part of the community and attract more visitors and hopefully some new volunteers to help care for it. Don't just think of it as a cemetery. Think of it as an outdoor museum, a historic site, a park full of artwork and history to be shared with the community. Now, I realize that not all cemeteries are the same and that the Jacksonville Cemetery is unique in a number of ways, and that it helps to make some of the events and programs that we host a little easier. However, there are several ways to recreate and breathe new life into other cemeteries and accomplish similar results. Every cemetery is a special place to its community and has stories and history to be shared with residents and visitors. People are attracted to cemeteries for a number of reasons. Some come to see the wonderful and ornate grave markers and monuments that adorn our cemeteries. Many are carved by well-known local artists, such as Whip and the Russells from Ashland. Others were shipped over long distances and under somewhat difficult circumstances when compared with today's mode of transportation. Some come to view and study the almost lost art of symbolism that can be found in found on many of these markers. Others visit to see and appreciate the beautiful ironwork that can still be found in many of our historic cemeteries, along with other cemetery ornamentation such as urns, bollards, entrance steps with usually the family name, and curbing that surround these family blocks. Other groups come to study genealogy, local or military history, while others use the cemetery grounds for their daily walks or runs, some for dog walking, viewing wildlife, and the various flowers and plants that can be found within the cemetery, especially this time of the year. It's absolutely gorgeous. Many just walk the grounds, studying the markers and taking advantage and enjoying the peace and tranquility that the cemeteries offer. There are even groups of artists who come to paint within the cemetery grounds. Plein air painting, as it is called, was featured in a story called Studio Under Sky, published by the Southern Oregon Medium Group in Outdoors in Our Valley. things to do and places to see in Southern Oregon. The artists shown on this photo were painting in the Jacksonville Cemetery. We especially appreciate the locals who use the cemetery for their daily walks and runs, as they are our eyes and ears when we're not there working. And they report anything unusual to the police. They are our stewards of the cemetery grounds. We actually really encourage locals to use the cemetery grounds for walking their dogs and exercise. Some of the events and activities that we offer at the Jacksonville Cemetery are pre-arranged walking tours, where docents guide their audience around the grounds and provide interesting information on the history of the cemetery and stories of those buried within its grounds. Our groups range from elementary and high school students to groups from the YMCA, retirement communities, groups and clubs from around Southern Oregon and cities beyond. We always try to find out well in advance of what the group is most interested in seeing and learning, and then design our tour in that direction. It helps to make the tour much more interesting and rewarding for the group, as well as our docents. For groups that may have some difficulty in getting around and can't really walk too far, we set up chairs and allow them to remain seated, not having to walk too far or too much. Our guests really appreciate it, and it allows us to share the cemetery with even a larger audience. History Saturday in the cemetery, we have that event on the second Saturday of each month, starting in the month of May and then continuing through the month of September. Thinking outside the box, rather than just offering the usual and expected walking tour, each month a new topic is presented and is followed by a tour to the parts of the cemetery and grave sites relating to that topic. Our early programs covered such things as the history of the cemetery, the history and the background of the various fraternal and religious organizations that make up 6 of the 7 sections of the Jacksonville Cemetery. Monument makers, where the monuments were made, the styles and materials, our local stone carvers, and cemetery symbolism were a couple others. More recently, topics have been on early medical practices of the 1800s, which featured a display of early medical instruments and the explanation of their uses. That caused some squirming in the audience. Followed by a visit to grave sites of some of Jacksonville's early doctors and stories of their lives. Another was on Victorian mourning customs, with our docents dressed in appropriate mourning attire. They discussed the practices of the time and the reasons people followed such a strict and proper procedure for mourning the deceased. A display of Victorian funeral announcements, pictures of the deceased, which was very popular at the time, floral arrangements, and a mourning wreath were also included. A very popular program was Love and Courtship, with the talk on courtship practices in the 1800s, and included a number of local love stories of those buried within the cemetery grounds. Other programs were on early business leaders, scandalous stories, mysteries and myths in the cemetery, to name but a few. One that we did last year that was great fun was called What in the World Was Going On When They Died? We visited a number of grave sites and talked a little bit about the individuals resting within that grave site, And then we went on to speak of what was going on in the world, in Oregon, the United States, and the world when this individual passed. It was a very well-received program and a great review of history. We first introduced History Saturday in 2011, and it continues to be a well-attended and successful program. Last year, we started a new event called Tuesday Evening Cemetery Stroll. We offer these after-dinner strolls on the second Tuesday of the month, May through August. Our goal was to be able to attract more people to the cemetery, people who worked and had families and weren't able to make any of the events that we offer during the week and on Saturday mornings. It's a great opportunity to get out after dinner, take a walk, and enjoy the nice weather. The turnout last year, which was our first year, was wonderful, and people really enjoyed the program so much that we will be offering it again this year, 2017. Well, there's another big event coming up in the month of May, Memorial Day. We've been doing a program called a meet and greet on Memorial Day, and we've been doing it for quite a few years. And volunteers start that weekend by placing flags on the grave sites of all of our veterans. We have over 360 veterans buried in the cemetery. And then the volunteers are on site on both Sunday and Monday from 11 to 3 to assist families in locating the grave sites of loved ones. We are also available to answer questions about the cemetery and the Friends organization. As May is National Preservation Month, we also take that opportunity to feature recent and past restoration and preservation projects that have been accomplished in the cemetery. We have photo boards set up at various restoration sites with before, during, and after photos. As people walk the grounds, they're able to take in and really appreciate the work that has been accomplished. This event is a wonderful way to connect with families who have loved ones buried in the cemetery. It's a very rewarding day for not only the volunteers, but families and friends as well. It's also, we find every year, not all the grave sites are marked with military markers. So this is a great opportunity when the families come and they see the flags, they see our station, they'll come over and inform us that their relative or friend was a veteran, and then we're able to mark that gravesite. And we place a flag, if not immediately, before we leave for the day. So our list of known veterans grows every year. Meet the Pioneers. This is our big yearly event and fundraiser for the Friends organization, which we put on each October. This event started out in 2006, and I'm not going to take credit as being the inventor. It was a borrowed program from the Historical Society in Grants Pass, who has been doing a cemetery tour up there for a number of years. But we started in 2006 after going to their event a couple of years as a way to make some money to allow us to go in and do some restoration work. Well, what we thought was going to be a one-time event turned out to be an ongoing event, not begrudging, I'm happy, but it was just so successful that very first year it sold out, and as people were leaving, they were saying, you are going to do this again next year, so we have. In 2015, we celebrated our 10th anniversary. We did take the year off last year as a fundraiser, but we were very fortunate that a group of local actors had approached me and put on a production, it was actually 3 weekends, of Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River Anthology. And that was done over at the Rogue Valley Community College. And it was just such a wonderful event. I learned so much from that, and hopefully can incorporate that in Meet the Pioneers, which I'm very happy to say will return this year on October the 6th and the 7th. We will be having tours again. We have quite a following that return year after year. The program is guided walking tours that depart every 15 minutes. And they go through the torchlit cemetery grounds. Players in period dress take on the lives of early pioneers and share their stories with the tour groups that are led through the cemetery. In addition to individual stories, we also cover important and interesting topics of the day, 1800s and early 1900s, such as Southern Oregon's Civil War, the smallpox epidemic, the last hanging in Jacksonville, the assassination of President Garfield, and the Christmas Gala at the new county courthouse, to name but a few. People, both local residents and visitors alike, really enjoy learning the history of the Rogue Valley and Southern Oregon through these living history programs. The costumes, props, torches, luminarias transform the cemetery into a very special theater for 2 evenings of the program. For the last few years, the program has been filmed, and then we do a movie and dessert night in January to share the film with all of the volunteers that help put the program on. Many of our presentations from over the years can be viewed on YouTube. Some examples of other types of events and activities that we have done to better showcase the cemetery and making it an important part of today's community were a Civil War memorial service to mark the anniversary of the start of our nation's Civil War. Civil War era poems were read, a prayer service was offered, bagpipes were played, and the names of all of those Civil War veterans buried in the cemetery were read aloud. It was a very moving ceremony. Very moving ceremony. I spent a lot of time in the cemetery, what can I say? The mayor closed the city offices and facilities so that all of the city employees could attend. Another special service was when we placed a military marker on the grave of Private Hayes Bengamin Taylor. He was a young Spanish-American war veteran who was killed in action. While his remains were returned to Jacksonville and his family in February of 1900, some 11 months after his death, his grave was never marked. It was interesting that when reading old newspaper accounts regarding Private Taylor's remains being returned to his family in Jacksonville, the whole town turned out for that funeral. Then, over 100 years later, a large crowd from that same community turned out for the placement of his long overdue military marker. We also did a memorial service in July of 2014 to mark the start of World War I. Our organization has sponsored and hosted a number of special programs with guest speakers talking on various subjects. A couple of them we partnered with local libraries and held the programs in their community meeting rooms. We also have the use of the library, Jacksonville Library display showcase at least 2 times a year. Our organization sets up a display on various subjects. that relate to the cemetery. Our May display relates to Veterans and Memorial Day, while the September display is usually a topic and features our October Meet the Pioneers program. These programs and displays allow us to bring the cemetery down off the hill and into the community. We set up information booths at street fairs and other community events as a way to let people know that there is an organization of volunteers who care for the cemetery and how they can help. Good exposure along with other community clubs and organizations. We also do special programs such as today and talk to groups such as the Southern Oregon Historical Society, Jackson County Library Services, Daughters of the American Revolution, and other retirement communities. This again is another opportunity to take the cemetery and its history out into the community. The Friends of the Cemetery hold monthly workshops on marker cleaning. We start in April, take May off because of all the Memorial Day activities, and then resume in June through September. And that's on the third Saturday of the month. And it's open to not only volunteers to help clean the markers in Jacksonville, but we encourage other cemeteries that have volunteers that are anxious to learn how to clean markers to please join us. We have conducted marker restoration workshops in a number of local cemeteries, and we sponsor 3 yearly community cleanup days of the cemetery grounds. We do one in March, May, and October. Our interpretive center, we took a small building, it's actually an old milk house that was on the cemetery property, and turned it into an interpretive center. We have display boards featuring write-ups and photos of our volunteers in action, cemetery news, upcoming events and activities, and cemetery rules and regulations. It contains a visitor register where people can leave contact information and also make comments if they're requesting any kind of information. This is also a good source when we're going after grants, either local or federal grants. We can demonstrate how many people actually come to the cemetery. And unfortunately, not everybody signs in. I'm sure you have that problem. We encourage people to sign in, but the majority fail to do so. This, along with our cemetery self-guided tour, brochure, and map, we have 10 interpretive panels and benches that are placed throughout the cemetery grounds. Welcome visitors to take their time and stroll the grounds. These items all add and enhance a visit to our outdoor museum. News coverage, we all know how important that is to our organizations. All these events and activities usually receive great coverage by the local newspapers and TV stations. Wonderful way to get the word out about all the activities going on in the cemetery. I believe one of the reasons we've been successful is in partnerships that we have made with local officials, receiving their support, partnerships with other organizations in the community, such as the Chamber of Commerce, the Jacksonville Boosters Club, fraternal organizations, and other civic and nonprofit groups all working together. Volunteers. Now here's an organization that really knows how to get volunteers. I was almost going to delete this, but I thought, no, I'll just throw it in there. There might be somebody in the audience. The genealogy group does such a wonderful job with volunteers. and we're fortunate as well. But another way of getting the community involved is keeping them interested in a need for volunteers. Have a list of the various jobs and tasks that need to be done for the various events and activities. Have things on the list that will allow everyone to get involved, no matter their age or physical limitations. Don't turn anyone away. Some people are able to do more physically demanding work, such as helping with grounds cleanup and marker restoration, while others can help with marker cleaning, and others may be able to help with greeting volunteers, having them sign in and passing out supplies. These volunteer activities, no matter what they are, give people a sense of ownership and pride that spreads throughout the community. In closing, I want to thank you for your attention and hope that perhaps I've given you some new ideas of things to look for and to appreciate on your next visit to one of our beautiful historic cemeteries. Also, that you may consider attending one of our History Saturday or Tuesday evening strolls that we have planned for this year. We'd love to have you join us. So with that, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Some of us used to joke while volunteering with Dirk at the cemetery, wondering amongst ourselves how he was able to convince us to join him in his cemetery passion week after week. There we were, raking leaves, cleaning markers, and a few of us discovering poison oak that lurked nearby. And yet, we loved it. And I suppose it's because we loved him and what he believed in. This is our history, he told me. If we don't care about it, if we don't restore it, if we don't repair it, it's going to be lost forever. I lost my best friend of the past 2 decades in January of this year, 2003, when Dirk Siedlecki suddenly passed on. My parents, he said, taught us the importance of cemeteries to families in the community. They taught us to always, always be respectful of those who've passed on. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.